On the third day of his visit to the Federation of Russia, at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin, Algerian head of state Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune held talks with his Russian counterpart on Thursday in Moscow, where both leaders signed a number of documents, including a declaration on deep strategic partnership between Russia and Algeria. Noting that the relationship between Russia and Algeria is of particular importance due to its strategic nature, President Putin identified Algeria as an important partner of Russia in the Arab world and Africa. In a meeting with Putin, Tebboune affirmed the historic and strong bilateral relationship, expressing Algeria's wish to accelerate its accession to the BRICS, an emerging market group that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The Russian head of state thanked his Algerian counterpart for his willingness to mediate the ongoing Ukraine war, among other regional and international issues. The two presidents also exchanged views in the Middle East and North Africa, particularly including the situation in Libya, Sudan, Western Sahara, as well as Palestine. This is All 24 News Special. Hello and welcome to today's special. Before we bring in our guest, here's the latest. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, signed a declaration of deepened strategic partnership between their countries. In a joint statement, the Algerian leader believed that the signing demonstrated a shared desire to advance bilateral ties in keeping with their long-standing 60-year-old history.
لقد سمحت هذه الفرصة بتوجيه جزيل شكرنا لفخامة الرئيس على دعم روسيا للترشح بلدي للانضمام إلى مجموعة البريكس، واتفقنا على المضي بالعلاقات الجزائرية الروسية إلى المزيد من التعاون، وهو ما يعكس توقيعنا على تصريح الشراكة الاستراتيجية المعمقة التي يشهد على حرصنا المشترك لتكثيف وتوسيع التعاون بما يتماشى مع مستوى علاقاتنا التاريخية التي تمتد إلى أكثر من 60 سنة، وذلك من خلال اعتماد خارطة طريق طموحة للتعاون الثنائي يهدف إلى الاستفادة من أوجه التكامل الاقتصادي بين البلدين.
For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin hailed the declaration of the strengthened strategic relationship signed with Algeria and described it a significant government document outlining the long-term aiming for bilateral cooperation between the two nations.
Уважаемый господин президент,
We have signed a package of important agreements aimed at further strengthening cooperation in various directions, among which we refer to the statement of the Deepened strategic partnership, which is the second important document through which clear priorities for long-term cooperation were set. In general, the program of the Algerian president is intensive and comprehensive.
All right, let's bring in our guest. We're joined live by Dr. Edmund Gary, Professor of International Relations at Georgetown University from Washington. And from Paris, we have Dr. Abdenour Toumi, Maghreb Studies expert, researcher at Osam, Turkey, and Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean Professor of International Education at California University. Thank you, gentlemen, for agreeing to be with us. And let me kick it off with you here, Dr. Edmund. How do you read the signature of the Declaration on Deep Strategic Partnership by the two countries' leaders?
Clearly, this is a major event, a historic event, which raises the level of relationship between Algeria and Russia to a new level. This relationship is a historic one. It's an old one. It has been a strong one. However, it has been basically in recent times that it has focused mostly on arms sales and training. Although Algeria was one of the close also countries which worked with Russia, and before that with the Soviet Union, where at least about somewhere between 50 to 60,000 Algerian soldiers were trained in the Soviet Union or in Russia. We have seen also Algeria is one of the best customers for Russian military equipment, but the leaderships of both Russia and Algeria wanted to raise the level of this relationship and get it beyond the question of military cooperation or even the historic relationship to a new level, because the Algerian government plans to launch during the coming years new initiatives, new relationships to promote its economy, its trade, its investment. It wants to develop its industry, its technology. It wants to also work together to build new industries in the areas of medicine and pharmaceuticals and in other areas. And all of this, actually, the Russians also at this time, they want to have partners that they can rely upon. The countries like Algeria, which is influential both in Africa as well as in the Arab world. It's a major player in both regions, and at the same time also there is a close perception of what's going on in the world between these two countries and their leaders, whereby they would like to see more cooperation between countries regardless of their backgrounds. But at the same time they want that. They do not want to see hegemony by one side or another over other countries, and they believe that it's important to pursue a more independent type of policy than what we have seen since the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Very nice. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Algeria and Russia signed a statement on deep strategic cooperation. President Putin said that the treaty marks the entry of the two countries' relations, that is, a new phase. What is the importance of this step, according to you? In your assessment, what are these new relations between Algeria and Moscow going to be like?
Well, it's very significant. If we put it a little bit in a very broad historical perspective, there are marking or data point that reflect what Putin, President Tebboune, and what we all have described as a historical visit. Pick up 1958. This is where, in the United Nations General Assembly, Nikita Khrushchev take off his shoes and started pounding on the table that Algeria demanded that Algeria is not French, and that the Algerian question be discussed at the United Nations General Assembly. At that time, in 1958, the French had refused to allow the Algeria to be discussed on the international level under the pretext or the claim that Algeria was a part of France. That's first historical that our sort of children and students remember. The second major event, 2006, this is when Russia, President Vladimir Putin came to Algeria, signed a major defense and security treaty with Algeria. But what is also significant at the time was that Russia forgave all Algerian debts, and that is also another event that showed that the Russian-Algerian relationships are more than just about business. What's significant about this, and as a doctor said earlier, this is a new chapter in that it focuses on the economic ties. Both people are very aware the significance of this. And it comes also amid what we have read in the media, and it's clearly there is a plan there to downplay this visit or putting it in a controversial perspective. I give you a specific example. There are 17 members of the European Parliament who said, who criticized this event. That's 17 out of 705 members of the parliament, meaning that at least 680 members of the EU who are either in favor of Algeria, have no opinion, don't care that much about it, but they are not against Algerian or against the visit. More to the point is that the media has emphasized the negative side, trying to project this as a controversial issue. So from that perspective, it is also historical because of what's happening in the Ukraine. And for Algerian president, who was invited by President Putin, is significant. Put it in another context, my last point, Karim, is that, remember, and this visit for Algeria are very strategic. They are well thought of, well planned. President Tebboune made recently a visit to Portugal, but that also there you could say or interpret it as sending a signal to Spain. Spain is now a member. It's going to be leading the European Union, and it is expected to have the refugees as a major issue for them to address. The same thing, even if it weren't for the bad relationship that exists with France and the recent attack on Algeria by France, this visit could be also interpreted in the context of Algeria placing its priorities with Russia more so than with France. So there are a lot of historical significance.
Very
on
nice.
it.
Point clear,
Yeah.
Dr. Hamoud Salhi. Let me just include Dr. Abdel-Nour Toumi. Algerian and Russian presidents reveals that they share the same visions on many international files. What is the impact of this on the future of relations between the two countries in light of the agreements signed here in particular?
Good morning to you and good evening to our distinguished guest. It is indeed, and chronologically, I have nothing to add because it was stated eloquently by our dear two professors. And on the historical level, it is indeed deep, and the relations, like now we know, goes back to more than 6 decades, and those relations have been excellent and solid. But now it is indeed a new page was opened in light of the declaration of this MDAS strategic partnership, which is very, very important in a time where the world is having or knowing some serious turbulence and troubles. So Algeria now came in this specific context and time, because don't forget, Algeria's diplomacy has been absent for 3 decades, and this is unusual and which is abnormal for Algerian diplomacy, now in that the late President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who was an excellent diplomat, he didn't push very, very hard on Algerian diplomacy for many reasons. We don't have time to speak about in here. But now Algeria did take this opportunity of this turbulence and position itself as, first of all, a stabilizing force, and also worried about its security, national security imperatives and concerns, and also its environment, now in that all its borders now are burning, east, west, and the south. And so Russia also has been, in the last, 18 months, in the aftermath of the ongoing war in Ukraine, needs some, let's say, breakthrough on this crisis that is dealing with, on one hand, the sanctions and so on from the West, and also showing the West particularly that indeed is still a serious partnership with the southern countries. And brings us to the equation of North-South dynamic.
Point clear. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdelnour Toumi. So, Dr. Edmund, what effects do we expect from this convergence of visions on a possible Algerian mediation in the Ukrainian crisis, especially since Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed his gratitude and gratefulness to Algeria and President Tebboune for his willingness to provide mediation efforts in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
This is a very significant point. I think it's very important, primarily because Algeria suggested this initiative to mediate the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia. Of course, we'll have to wait and see to what extent this is going to be successful, because this has been a difficult, very difficult conflict. There have been other attempts to also resolve the conflict, but I think Algeria wants to try to mediate the conflict. I think it would be in the interests of both countries, the Ukraine and Russia, and in the interest of world peace, in fact. And as a result, they have suggested this idea. And interestingly enough, the Russian president has said that he welcomes this initiative, this effort to mediate the conflict. That in itself is a significant sign also of the strength of the ties between the two leaders and between their countries, that they are willing to accept that. Of course, this is not the only issue that they want to work together on. For example, what we have seen is that Algeria wants to also join the BRICS, and that is a
And before
very,
the
very
BRICS, Dr. Edmund Garib, sorry to cut your train of thoughts, because we will get back to the BRICS point just a little later. I just want you to tell me what you think about the leaders of the two countries expressing consensus in positions regarding many issues, such as the Libyan and Malian files here, in addition to the Palestinian and Western Sahara issue.
Exactly. I think this is an excellent point. I think the issue of Mali, for example, where the two countries could perhaps even call for an international conference to resolve this issue, to deal with the question of terrorism. You could also have the question of Libya. This is a very, very important issue also for Russia and for Algeria, and for the whole region, in fact, and for the world. So I think both countries have a good relationship. They have trust between them, and they can perhaps launch an initiative in this direction. The two countries also have historically and in recent times emphasized the importance of having sovereignty respected and independence of decision-making also taken seriously and respected by other countries. And this is something that's extremely important to Algeria and to Russia. That's another important area where they can cooperate. There's also, in addition to that, there is another area where in recent times there has been a disagreement between the United States and Algeria over whether it's, for example, the issue of the Palestinian issue. This is another important issue where Algeria has not been very receptive to the Abrahamic Accords. They said that there has to be a Palestinian state with its capital as Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, and that is a very, very significant statement. And Algeria tried recently, before the recent Arab summit, the last years that was held in Algiers, tried to bring together the various Palestinian factions, and they have emphasized the idea of the rights, respecting and the rights of the Palestinian people, and the need to have a Palestinian state. I think all of these are areas where we might be able to see some cooperation between these two countries, and that's why I think this kind of relationship, while this takes, as both of your distinguished guests also mentioned, raises this level of cooperation and working together, this strategic accord to a new level. It goes beyond the military cooperation, it goes beyond even some of the economic cooperation towards international arenas where they might be able to work together in Africa and the Middle East and maybe beyond, like as we see now, at least maybe the effort to bring an end to the conflict in the Ukraine. I think these are very important steps, very important developments for both countries and for the countries that they will be involved.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Gharib, for all these clarifications. You were live with us from Washington. Let me get back to you here, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. How do you see the mediation initiative in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? How will the consensus, Algiers and Moscow, be supported in resolving the regional crisis, not just in Ukraine, but also here in Africa?
There are many levels where Algeria can be successful. On the African level, we just know, we saw how the African Union fully endorsed without any doubts of Algeria's membership to the United Nations Security Council. And as known, African could have objected to this membership, could have said we want another country. Case in point, Belarusia was supposed to be the next member in the United Nations Security Council. Certain European countries and the United objected. They chose Slovakia. Slovakia was elected instead of Belarusia. So there is a precedent for that the African countries separately or within the Union could have said no to Algeria. But because of its credibility and its long history of working for resolving conflicts in Africa, no African country objected, nor was there a problem with the United Africans. So that's the first context where Algeria could play an instrumental role in resolving, being a member of the Security Council, non-permanent member. It could use that prestige position to play an instrumental role in the Security Council. Connected to that, Algeria has a good relationship with all members of the Security Council, including the new one, and most important, some countries that have shown a strong interest in pursuing peaceful resolutions. Guyana, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, all of these countries Algeria could find a way of how to work with them. So that's also helped create certain kind of bloc within the Security Council to push for a peaceful resolution. And finally, when you look at the recent trend in Russia, and this is not just because of the war in Ukraine, next July, the Russians are hosting an African summit. And President Vladimir Putin has extended the invitation to President Putin. Frankly, it's too soon to send him another invitation, but it's a good gesture. So also from that perspective, on the relation on the African continent issue, was it problems in Mali, problem in Western Sahara, all of this, Algeria, Russian alliance would be very important. And the last point, in terms also when we look at the structure and how the Security Council function, in recent years, there is a new formula or new way of non-permanent members to team up and lead a session as co-chairs of initiatives that promote peace. Algeria, and through that initiative, for example, initiative like that the General Assembly was able to pass a resolution in 2022 by forcing the Security Council members using their veto right to justify the use of that right before a debate on the General Assembly and to hold them somehow accountable or along those lines. The point is that the structure of the Security Council, the membership of the Algeria in that Security Council also add another dimension, another element that will make this relationship very, very successful and productive and could contribute to the resolution of the conflict in the Ukraine crisis.
Very nice. And Dr. Abdenour Toumi, would you like to jump in and add something regarding this convergence of views between the two countries and how important they are and how they could actually facilitate the resolution of many issues, especially in the African continent here?
It is indeed. I mean, both countries have good leverage to position themselves in a matter of conflict resolution, and starting, like it was stated earlier, by the Malian conflict, and then not only in Mali, but also, as again, in Burkina Faso and other African Sahel countries, and also could go east to Sudan. But I think the key here, in terms of finding a solution or a mediation to solve an immediate conflict that is threatening Algerian national security, we start with Libya. And both countries have a good, I would say, presence and also influence. I mean, historically, even Russia has an old relationship with the actors, and currently the belligerent in Libya, so that Algeria, so this can break through and go to south, and will help to find again at least to bring the main belligerent in Mali and break through or at least enhance Algiers accord. And then from on this stance, so the issue of resolving conflicts rhymes with economic development. So now in that, Russia is also worried about other rising states who are also kind of not directly but indirectly threatening its presence, and notably China and Turkey. Mm-hmm. So this, again, Algeria has an excellent position, and it is actually, I would say, it's an enviable position by many countries, because Algeria can now, with its paradigm of diversification vision, can have these good, excellent relations with all these rising states and superpowers, mm-hmm. and help, again, Russia to break through and have kind of, at least trying to be as, again, a stabilizing force, unlike what we are hearing, again, here in France, like Russia has become, again, the France's nightmare and headache in the region.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
And Africa.
Very nice. It is a shared responsibility indeed to try to find stabilization for all these countries that are suffering crisis. And here, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, how could the coordination between Algeria and Russia, as part of gas exporting countries here, as well as in OPEC Plus, actually help stabilize the market in the one hand, and perhaps reinforce and strengthen the position of these oil and gas producing countries in the world?
Well, remember, because of Algeria, or in Algeria, that Russia became a member of OPEC Plus, a meeting that was in Oran. So there is a recognition of the Algerian mm-hmm. leadership, of the power of Russia in that perspective. I think the relationship has a lot of potential. And it has a lot of significance, not just in the gas issue, but in future relationship. The way the world is moving, we're moving toward multilateralism. We're moving toward what some could define as away from the American hegemony, away from the dollar currency as the international currency, move to give more power to the national currencies. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where this relationship could be looked at is an added dimension to how the world is going to be structured in post-Ukraine era. The gas issue, as we know, was very, very important. Again, how it when the European decided to boycott or not to buy gas, Russian gas, in attempt to sanction them. The Algerians were there, but President Tebboune and the Algerian leadership made it clear that they are not there to replace the Russian gas. But more than anything else, you see how this relationship is evolving. It's not about competition; it's really strategic, and I think it has also some other significance that has not been absent from the Russian leadership. In one of his declaration in Algeria, in his last visit to Algeria, Lavrov made a very, very important observation. He was asked about Algeria's role in not taking part of sanctioning the Russians the way the European countries were doing, and we all know the Algerian position on this issue. He came back with a very smart answer, which basically he talked about how the Algerian people are people who understand, who are so grateful to people who do them well. In other words, we've seen this with China. Algerian leadership and its people recognize, as we say in our culture, the good deed that others do for you. And this is truly represented what President Tebboune has done with China and with Russia. But he added something else, that he cannot see the Algerian people. He didn't talk about Algerian leadership. He said the Algerian people to join a group or a country that their national interest doesn't serve them well. The point is this: Algeria's role or a principle that respects sovereignty of others, that underline the independence of decision making. These are all that connect very well with Russia, and Russia are as clear evidence, and not just because the Ukraine is there and Ukraine wants this, but this is historical. I gave the example where Khrushchev using his shoes and throwing it on the table, saying Algeria is not France, and that is 1958. That is against the French. So there is something there that one could build, and joining them together in a new world order would be really, really significant. And we did not see this, a competition in the gas issue in Europe and all of that is an example of the good partnership that might come outside with this visit.
Very nice. And Dr. Abdel Toumi, President Putin stressed the interest of the Russian side in the visit. And here it can be noted that usually during official visits, a bilateral meeting is organized between Putin and the guest president only. But during President Tebboun's visit, he was received by the highest Russian Federation bodies with an official reception in the Federation Council and the Duma Council. Why is this exceptional Russian interest in Algeria?
I think it is. I agree with you. I mean, it is huge and it is impressive. I mean, for given these, I mean, just in terms of protocol, given this high, again, prestigious welcome and warmth welcome to President Tebboune by President Putin. It is actually a message also not only for regional leaders, but also for the world leaders. And that indeed, President Putin, he measures highly the role of Algeria, especially as Professor Sarhi mentioned, in eventually the post, I would say, Ukraine war. We will see how this will, I mean, the latest event on the ground will play out. Because don't forget, Algeria excelled to position itself between the two axes. I mean, the axis Moscow, Beijing, and the axis Washington, Brussels. However, on the latter, Algeria is not looking at the European Union as an integral process. It's taking it part by part. In other words, it's taking it bilaterally, and is having an excellent now relations with Italy. And the latest visit of President Tebboune to Portugal, it comes on that direction. And also, I would say that semi-tensions with Spain, we'll see until the next parliamentary election in Spain, and the outcome of the result will reshape the relations between the two countries. Now, how President Tebboune looks at Algiers, he knows well the position of Algeria on the map and in terms of geopolitics. So he needs a country like Algeria, I mean, even symbolically, to be not on his side, but following his policies, because don't forget, Algeria now is taking in full independence of decision making and when it comes to its foreign policies. So this is why now Algeria is having and using the sacrosanct principle of the non-alignment and is working for Algeria. Now, the only thing Algiers need is to implement this paradigm and show again position itself in this new posture that is taking place in world affairs.
Excellent. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, President Tebboune's visit got a great deal of attention from international media and the Western one here in particular, with many outlets raising the issue of Algeria strengthening its relations with Russia at the expense, let's say, of its relations with the West. Here, is there a justification for this fear on the ground that perhaps Algeria is kind of, bettering its relations with, let's say, the Eastern camp at the expense of the Western one? Is this even solid?
No, it has no justification, but you have all the cards stacked against you. Just in his historical perspective for what's happening to this visit, if you put it another way, the BRICS is meeting, I believe, in South Africa in August. Prior to this visit, the Western media raised the issue of whether President Putin would be arrested when he landed in South Africa, because there is a warrant against him, allegedly accusing him of war crimes in the Ukraine. And they expected that South Africa would not would oblige and arrest him. Well, that's not what's the South African position, because they know very well this plan, the accusation, is really a fabrication. And just to cite a clear example, how often Israel has violated, done crimes against humanity and went hand-free. And how many of those people who are accused of violation of crimes against humanity have been sort of not friends or ally of United States? If you are an ally of the Western world, you get sort of your you are going to be do whatever you want. Crimes are okay for you. We've seen this as how the media reported the war or the refugees in the Ukraine. So fast forward to this, to President Tebboune's visit, there was a lot of discussion on this will not be successful because these two countries have strong military relationships, and they are going to work in the context of military relationship, and because they have no other things in common, the visit is not will not produce anything, and instead presented it as if Algeria taking side against somebody else, or Russia finding in President Tebboune a way of getting it out of isolation. It's how the Western media works, and it is driven by Western agendas. And the example I gave you earlier about the European Union, where 705 members, only 17 of them said, Algeria is in the wrong. The same thing with the House of Representatives in the United States, where I believe 20 or 24 House members demanded or attempted to form, to draft a bill to condemn Algeria or to sanction Algeria for its relationship again with Russia. But that's again 20 or 24 out of 435. So you and I will not write that story about how that there is a group against Algeria, whether the European Union or so. It will be about how the European Union is supporting Russia's meeting in Moscow. That's the story, that's the narrative, but that doesn't fit with the biggest agenda, Karim.
And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, how does Algeria's balanced position serve the principle of non-alignment here, which resurfaced amid this global multipolarity?
Remember, the non-alignment was not about just staying aside and not getting involved. It was a non-aligned constructive. But what happened in the 1970s, 1973, the non-alignment movement, the non-aligned movement met in Algeria, and on the agenda, the new international economic order. A bit of a perspective, Karim. At that time, the discussion was the two reasons for the existence of the non-aligned movement were bring the two superpowers together. That goal was achieved because you had a deterrence between the former Soviet Union and the United States. Both reached the understanding that entering into a detente is better for the world than not. The second thing is the reason the non-aligned movement was created is to help countries that were under the colonization be independent, where that goal was achieved by 1973. So before the meeting in Algiers, the understanding was, or the prediction was, that this is the end of the non-alignment movement until the late President Houari Boumediene surprised them, or surprised everybody and the Algerian delegation with the announcement of the new international economic order. That led to the call by the Algerian for the United Nations General Assembly to meet in an extraordinary session, meaning that Algeria was able to gather 2/3 of the world countries to meet in New York in a special meeting to discuss the new international economic order. So in many perspectives, this is where we are at this point, a new world order that needs to be sort of multilateral, where the economy plays a role. And the shift of Algeria to BRICS, this meeting with Russia, is all an indication that we're moving toward a new rules in international political economy, and this relationship could be built along to lay the foundation for that new framework. And add to that the Chinese, and if you add on top of that the third world countries, how Algeria's role of a non-alignment has been very, very positive. The non-aligned movement, the shift to constructive positivism, constructive position to resolve conflict is well within what is needed this time. Sudan is a clear example. We've seen an initiative from the African countries developing. How much of that will be sort of successful? And I think those are the little trends that are happening. I think Africa, in the case of the Sudan, is sending a signal that we don't want, we want no one to interfere in our position. And that movement, as we have seen, is gaining sort of some support among others. Initiatives led by that are going to be led by Algeria fits very well with this non-aligned movement, which is, we are not going to contribute to the fight. We are going to contribute to the solution of the conflict.
Great. And Dr. Abdel Noor, Toumi, between alliances and partnerships, Algeria has always based relations on the principle of multiplicity, let's say, of partners and balance with everyone. How important is this in our world today?
It is, and especially in the aftermath of a multipolar system. And Algeria knows, again, how to manage this and how to position itself with either superpower and regional powers and raising states. So, and Algeria has good relationship with Russia, China, and I mean even with the U.S. I mean the relations relations between the two countries are not that bad. Actually, both countries are working together and having a kind of prudence, and both countries are a little bit watching each other because of the non-alignment principle of Algeria, because Algeria doesn't want sound or seem to be or to get close to the US in order to not be labeled as a pro-Western country. And also, actually, psychologically, sometimes psychology is important in diplomacy. It emphasizes that the country can be fully independent and can manage about its national security and national interests, and also position itself in the aftermath or like mediations, like we stated early on, and the proposal of Algiers to position itself as credible mediator in this international conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I think it is valid. Nonetheless, it is complex. So now, for Algeria also, the multiplicity of partnership or relations helps the country also to have a say, and we have been experiencing this, for instance, in the relation between Algeria and France. That lately, these relations are following the dynamic of, let's say, the permanent tensions, but they are, because we all know these relations cannot be normal, are anything but normal. But this is the problem. It is not coming from Algiers, it's coming from Paris. And I'm going to quote Napoleon Bonaparte, and he says, in time of war, never interrupt your enemy when he is making mistakes. So this is what exactly President Macron is doing. He had the chance last year to lift up the relation to second level, but he is cornered for some domestic politics and also the lobbies that are surrounding him. Like for instance, the nostalgic of the pro-l'Algérie française, and now the race of the far-right party in the parliament, and how he's playing again a tough role in the French politics. Also, French media and elite now, and President Macron got trapped into that, are still in their state of denial when it comes to sensitive issues in the relations. So the reason why I'm bringing this to let understand, our viewers, that Algeria now is in excellent position. Only one thing, they need to continue on this path and push harder and also implement this on the field.
So simply, without depending on anyone whatsoever, having multiplicity of partners actually can help any given country to, let's say, keep up its economic spin, let's say, or let's say wheel spinning, I'm saying. I ask you again, Dr. Abdulnoor Toumi, the Russian president affirmed his country's support for Algeria's accession to the BRICS here. How will this position by Vladimir Putin serve Algeria's chances of joining the BRICS?
And again, it is excellent, and Algiers is waiting for this, to get full membership among the BRICS members and become, again, a serious country in this economic and geoeconomics and geopolitics bloc. in the south. But President Putin, he needs also a country like Algeria to have it in the BRICS like they got. The BRICS got Brazil and South Africa, and then putting in between India and China. So all this will, I would say, again, create a huge shift in international order, and also will create a panic in the West, and notably here in France, actually in Paris. I don't know, I'm not sure about that, but actually I read some reports like even President Macron is, he wants to attend the Johannesburg summit in August. This is surreal. So because he is in a panic mode, I'm taking France because I live here and I know the relations between Algeria and France are very, very sensitive. So Russia knows that. And Russia, it's not new. Russia knows that before. As Dr. Sarkis stated, it goes back to the Khrushchev shoe at the National Assembly, UN National Assembly. When he was, challenging the French delegation and he's telling them, okay, Algeria is not France. So President Putin knows that and knows the way of Algeria in geopolitically and geoeconomically in the Mediterranean and also in the Arab world and in Africa.
Good. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Putin said his country is counting on activating cooperation relations with Algeria at the level of the Security Council. How does this serve the issue that Algeria places at the top of its foreign priorities, especially the Palestinian cause and Western Sahara, as well as reforming the Security Council by granting the African continent 2 permanent seats?
There is a lot of that to unpack, Karim. Let's begin by the easiest one, which to many is the most difficult one. But I came to the conclusion that the membership of the the permanent membership in the United Nations, adding another permanent member is really more of an academic issue. It's highly discussed, highly examined in the literature and among professors and people like me and Dr. Toomey. But in reality, the reality is different. When you look at in the Security Council, the reforms by the United Nations has been really more about suggestion than implementation. But there has been some major development in that regard, which I see as Algeria playing an instrumental role in highlighting the issue of reform or issues that pertain to changing some of the working of the Security Council. I mentioned earlier about the initiative or the co-chair of initiative, which basically states that a non-member or non-permanent member can present an initiative if they have a partner from the Security Council. India and I believe South Africa at one point, India particularly, teamed up with 3 other United Nations Security Council members the same way as where Algeria is, to introduce what I mentioned earlier, holding members of the Security Council accountable for their usage of the veto and inviting them to debate on the United Nations General Assembly floor about justifying why they use it at the time when you use it. Just imagine, for example, a discussion about United States boycotting, using its veto to support Israel. That is significant. I think that's where Algeria could play a very significant role, is looking at a small thing that could have a big impact on the Security Council. And why I'm saying this, that Africa's having another member is a little bit too premature to talk about this. The way you look at the Security Council today is very divided, and it's going to be divided because you have an inherent differences between Russia and the United States. Now, where Algeria can be instrumental or play a major role in in this area, particularly in the issues of the Ukraine, Syria, as you mentioned earlier, Karim, in Western Sahara, the Palestine, is that what we know of the non-permanent members, and studies have been done about this is what graduate students do or professors do, is they count how many times, what kind of issues the non-permanent members have done in the past. Well, the conclusion that most studies have reached for a period of 20 years that non-permanent members play a very good role, instrumental role, either by forming a bloc around them, but when they don't have the power, they tend to align for pushing for independent inquiries, and the second with hold the United Nations Security Council responsible, or to suggest that Algeria's credibility and relationship that it has with member states, it will have a major role in resolving some international problems. Ukraine is one of them, because Syria is another, and Sudan, and needless to say, the issue of Palestine, where Algeria will push for that permanent presence, membership of the Palestinians in the United Nations, and along with the Western Sahara. It's a tall order, and the foreign minister has on many occasions said it. It's a huge responsibility, but I think, as we discussed before, Algeria is ready for that, and the context in which this is happening helps Algeria. The visit to Russia today adds value to that position of Algeria in the Security Council as a non-permanent member.
Great. And just to conclude, Dr. Abdel Toumi, maybe we can shed some light a little on the economic aspect. Again, Air Algeria has expressed interest in the Russian tourism market, seeking more links with Russian airports. How do we analyze this interest?
This is a good news, but actually, again, it comes to the Air Algeria itself company to position itself and to market itself better. And again, for instance, if we are looking for an example, and actually we have, again, another country that Algeria has signed a strategic partnership with it, I mean Turkey. And if you see Turkish Airlines today is positioned itself, and it has become for Turkey as Turkey foreign policy, like one of its foreign policy determinant. So this is, again, we need to bring tourists. We spoke about investment and for investors yesterday, and to get them, to give them like kind of, let's say, flexible milieu that they can perform in the country. But Air Algeria also needs to, again, establish a deep reform and position itself among the international companies that can, of course, play, I mean, domestically and regionally and internationally. And this is an opportunity for Algeria to be like the, let's say, the bird ambassador of Algeria.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdel Toumi. Dr. Hamoud Salhi, thank you ever so much for agreeing to be with us. Special thanks also goes to Dr. Edmond Gharib for being with us. And special thanks goes to you, dear viewers, as well, for keeping it here on our channel. Till next time, take care.